apparently I didn't get the memo that I had to open this up with some insightful anecdote or quote, so instead I'll make an observation. Clearly I'm not from around here, and Portland is the first city I've ever visited where I'm honest to God not sure if people are homeless or just art students. No, in all seriousness, it's a really cool town, and I'm super, super stoked to be out here, especially because I've been following this now for a little while, and what an awesome venue. It's beautiful, and then especially what an awesome forum. Just getting an opportunity for us to come together as a community and sharing some pretty important conversations that need to take place. I'm not going to dwell on it real quick about me. Like I said, my name is Matt Adkins. I work for the City of Danville, Virginia. I'm currently assigned to Engine 5B, that's the rescue engine, and I just got hired there back in 2015. I'm also a volunteer at the Bedford, Virginia Fire Department. I am a co-founder of the Full Alarm Fire Training, and I just recently had the opportunity to get published in Firehouse.com. I published an article called Pride in How You Ride, and that's going to kind of come into play a little bit later with my presentation. And then because this whole thing is really going to be a little bit about perspective, just to give you a perspective of where I work, it's not a huge city. It's 44 square miles, 7 fully staffed engine companies. We are an ISO Class 1 department, internationally accredited, so that's pretty cool. We sit right on the Virginia-North Carolina border, and it's a very old school historic town. A lot of turn-of-the-century construction, a lot of pre-war construction. Just like the Rust Belt, when everything went overseas, the economy kind of dried up, and now we're going through this really exciting renaissance where everything's being repurposed. So it's a really exciting place to not just live, but also to work with some pretty unique challenges. So what I'm not going to do today, though, is talk about tactics. All right, I'm still very much a student in that aspect, but what I am going to talk about today is culture, okay? More notably, culture of pride. We hear pride and culture tossed around in the fire service every day, right? Right? But really, what do they actually mean? And I think culture is one of, if not probably the most important aspects of the fire service, because let's be honest, culture ultimately dictates actions, okay? So let's kind of look at a couple definitions real quick. I found this one really interesting because right off the bat, we see that pride is pretty polarized, right? The quality or state of being proud, such as inordinate self-esteem or reasonable or justifiable self-respect. And this one's a little more straightforward, a source of pride, the best in a group or class, and I think that's probably the most applicable to the fire service in my opinion. Right? In spiritual contexts, pride is often condemned as being a bad thing, but then we flip a coin, we look at the fire service, like, oh, pride is a good thing, it's a sign of being a good firefighter, okay? And then the other definition I want to look at real quick is culture. Again, this one's way more straightforward. It's a set of values, conventions, or social practices associated with a particular field or societal characteristic. So I think we can all agree that the fire service as a whole is in fact a culture, right? But I think there's also a lot of subcultures, and Mark actually mentioned it earlier, there's a lot of subcultures within the fire service, and that's really what I want to talk about today. So in order to really get into the meat and potatoes of my conversation, I want to lay some foundation as to how I arrived at the mindset that I have today, all right? I'm at this point in my career right now where I still see myself as being the student, but now I'm starting to transition into that teaching phase. I had the awesome opportunity to teach in the last 2 volunteer county fire academies, and also in the last 2 city fire academies. And it's been weird. I've had to go through this kind of funky introspective journey of how to transition from being the student to being the teacher. And what I've really landed on is I think one of the best ways to be a good teacher in the fire service is to be a mentor, right? Teachers teach, but mentors inspire. So you can throw information at someone all day long, but if they aren't in the right mindset to take in that information, it's kind of a toss-up as what's going to stick, okay? But if you inspire people to want to learn, to want to be there, you have a much higher % chance of them actually retaining that information and then going on and forwarding it and developing it into what works for them. So let's rewind a little bit. This is a photo from very early on in my journey. That's me over there on the right, back before I was eating 3 Firehouse meals a shift. I started, like a lot of us, I started in a small volunteer fire department, maybe ran 300 calls a year, not very busy. It's kind of like a suburban, rural interface. But right off the bat, I figured out that I loved this, right? This is what I want to do for a career. And I decided that that was a path I was going to pursue, but I really didn't understand how to go about pursuing it at that time, right? But when I first got in the door, one of the first things that they taught me, pride in which you ride, right? We've all heard it. Take pride in what you ride, pride in what you ride, pride in what you ride. And I went all in, all right? Washing the trucks daily, probably leaving, watermarks on the windshields and stuff. But I loved it, but I also had a very limited understanding of the fire service outside of my little corner of it, okay? Like I said, not a very busy department. I can't stress this enough. Great group of people. They honest to God cared about their community, but it definitely wasn't that like all-in culture. They were farmers and mechanics on the side, really as their primary career. And so as I started exploring the other corners of the fire service, taking classes and stuff, I kind of grew out of asking the really easy to answer questions of how, started asking those more difficult questions of why. And because I was young and I didn't have that mentor figure, I didn't know what the right forum was to ask those, all right? And it was really, really easy for me to be led down these little rabbit holes of information without any real structure to it. So a buddy of mine who was on the job in a local city recommended that I do a live-in program. If anyone here isn't familiar with it, it's where students and aspiring young firemen can go and they can live at a busy firehouse. So I picked one that was about 2 hours from my house. Let's go back. Picked one that was about 2 hours from my house, and I knew it was going to be a wealth of knowledge. A lot of their part-time guys were full-time guys in the big, Baltimore, D.C. metro area. So right off the bat, I knew it was going to be a wealth of knowledge. But looking back, I think it's really, really interesting because my very first impression of walking into this fire department was really nice, shiny trucks, really clean, awesome tools, right? And so in my head, it triggered, oh, this department has a lot of pride because they have nice things. Right, because at that time, I had been taught to quantify or qualify what made it a fire department good based off how nice their stuff was. Back home, the mark of a good fire station was how many trophies, how many parade trophies were in the trophy case. So, enter the probie book. And this is another guy I lived at, and here we can see his probie book. It's frozen in a block of ice, and it says, "I'm lost, Mayday." And all jokes aside, do you think that kind of encourages accountability and attention to detail? Absolutely. So they hand me this probie book, and it's a 3-ring binder filled with skill checkoffs and all kinds of case studies. We had to do our own self-study of a line of duty death. Really, really, really cool stuff. And the way it worked was you go out, you demonstrate a skill, and they sign you off on it. It's important to note that we had to have Firefighter 1 to get in the door. And where I came from, Firefighter 1 was like going above and beyond. And here they were like, well, congratulations, you've met the minimum requirements to be here. Now we turn you into a firefighter. And I'll never forget, I was sitting on the couch pretty early on, which is something that we were absolutely not supposed to do as a probie. And there's the guy Ryan shows up. And the guys used to kind of, you could tell, they were like, oh man, Ryan's here, man, we're going to be training and stuff. And he immediately singles me out because I was the new guy. He was like, hey, where are you in your probie book? I was like, oh, I got to throw ground ladders. Like, okay, cool. So we go out, we threw ground ladders for hours. Like my arms were jello. And afterwards, I went up and I was like, hey, man, thanks for taking the time to train with me. Will you sign my book? And he was like, no. You're not at that point yet where I'm comfortable signing your book. And that was the first person who I kind of picked up on a totally different mentality, right? They had the expectation, at work we call it pencil whipping, when you just sign something to sign it. He had the expectation for me to actually learn, for me to be good at my job. He understood the point of the probie book. Turns out he wrote it, and that's why he understood it. But the weird thing is that any other day I probably would have been disgruntled. Maybe the grass was just the right shade of green that day. But I, right off the bat, gravitated towards that style of leadership. And I started looking around, and I realized that he really was kind of like this renegade. The chief officers really didn't like it when he came around because he would leave. He arbitrarily painted these things on the wall. And then he would leave really insightful tidbits around the station, really trying to rally the troops. And I think that was the first point in my career where I started to notice a mentorship forming for me in my career. I hadn't had something up until that point, and this is 3 years into it. So, and the big thing out of everything that he did is that he was creating that culture of personal accountability. He was creating that desire to be really good at our jobs, right? Imagine that. I didn't realize they didn't care about the ooh, ah, shiny competitions, right? They held high standards for their crew that they reinforced through routine training, right, through routine maintenance, and they weren't proud of what they rode. They were proud of how they rode it, right? They weren't proud that their stuff was clean. They were proud that their stuff was well maintained, so when they hit the fire ground, they excelled. All right, and I think that's an important mentality because really, let's think about it. You could have two clean trucks side by side, but if one's clean to look nice and one's clean to function properly, which one's more likely to function properly? The one that's clean and well-maintained to function properly, okay? So I think everything boils down to that. So why doesn't this attitude exist everywhere, right? Unfortunately, the concepts of personal accountability aren't always passed down through mentors, right? Specifically in the important formative years. It may exist in some places and hopefully in most places, but I think we can all think of that one fire station that we've been to, volunteer or career, that they wear the concept of being a firefighter proudly on their sleeve, but then when it comes time to actually do firefighter things, it's just not convenient to them. They have other things to do, right? Who's heard this before? We can't train, we have too many other things to do, right? That's kind of a poisonous and dangerous mentality, I think, that's echoed throughout the fire service. And as a new guy, I really expected the fire service as a community to like lift me up on their shoulders and be like, follow me, I'm going to turn you into a firefighter. And it really didn't happen like that. So I'm sure most of us have seen this here before, right? But how many people do we know at our fire departments that actually truly live by this? There's a big, you look in any corner of the social media and there's a big discrepancy between volunteer or career, but I think at the end of the day, it's really, really important that we are able to audit ourselves and our departments and take a step back and look at some essential criteria, right? Response times, qualification of personnel, the number of personnel that we can put on a scene, and specifically, I think the most important one, the quality of service that we're providing to the public. And if you can check all those boxes off, rock on with what you're doing. Keep functioning the way that your organization is functioning. But if you're failing to check off some of those boxes, then it's your responsibility. You have this inalienable responsibility to the community to fix that so you provide the service that they expect. They might not necessarily know better, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't hold ourselves to a higher standard. All right? And this is the big thing. How do we actually go about changing that? All right? Who here, we've seen all these before, right? We don't have those kinds of problems here. Big city stuff doesn't work here. That wouldn't happen here. I work in a small city. These are all pictures, most of them within a 5-minute walk from where I live, of some of the different challenges. This is a 15-minute walk, and then 2 pictures from calls where I work up on the north end. So I don't understand what the excuse is to not be able to say, okay, you know what? Maybe we can borrow some pages out of other departments' playbooks that are set up to actually conquer these challenges, right? And then this is kind of unrelated, but this is one of my favorite pictures, is the insurance will replace it argument. We found this on a fire a couple months back. I don't know about you guys, but I really don't think insurance is going to replace this. That's a Medal of Honor up there for anyone who can't see or whatever. And then this is the big one, right? That's how we've always done it, and this has been thrown around so many times. And this can actually be a really tough argument, especially if you're a department like my department that actually does go to fires and regularly puts them out pretty quickly. We put multiple companies on scene seconds apart, because it kind of gives the naysayers a golden ticket, right? Well, what we're doing is working. That doesn't mean that we can't get better, right? It doesn't mean we can't improve. Right now, our 2 big fights is portable ground ladders and gallons per minute, which I'm sure is not a fight that we are fighting alone. But that's our big fight right now with some of the young guys. At the end of the day, I'm a 3-year guy. I can't go to the 20-year guy and say, hey, Dick, why aren't we proactively laddering a building when it's on fire, right? Because chances are I'm going to get silenced and swept under the rug, right? So the big thing is that when we want to change things, we have to be able to build this mentality first. Because like I said earlier, actions a lot of times follow mentality, right? So this is where that culture shift, the culture shift that I experienced, this is where we can start to bring this into our department, okay? Why? For them, for us, okay? I'm a firm believer that obviously these people up here is the most important, but for us is also important. They all boil down to the same thing of having that mentality going into it. When I first started getting into this, I would look up to other departments because they looked so cool on YouTube or stuff like that, or, to begin with, because they had nice stuff. But really, I think that if we remove ourselves from that bravado of, trying to look cool, and we just really focus on what we need to do when we hit the streets, we're kind of setting ourselves up for success because we're going into it with a mentality. We're going into it with the right mindset. This is one of the reasons why I care. This is January 5th, 2018. what we see right here, this is a cantilever roof collapse on a single-family dwelling. My engine company was making a push from the mudroom into the garage when this collapsed on me, and I was pulled out by my, at the time, acting captain, and then 2 guys off the truck company, right? So I think this is important because they cared. Obviously, they cared about my life. All of us can agree that we care about each other's lives, but the big thing is that they cared enough. They cared enough to be really good at their jobs, to be able to perform at 100% under extremely stressful conditions, worsening smoke conditions, worsening fire conditions, pulled me up over 2 truss cords right here and pulled me out. All right, so that's because they existed within the fire service with that mentality of wanting to be really good at what they do. And personally, I really don't think that just throwing a sticker on your car or putting on a t-shirt and calling yourself a firefighter is sufficient, because how are you going to perform in a situation like that? And that was my life, so I take that pretty seriously. So we decided that we're going to try to create this culture change, right? We have 2 critical audiences, okay? The rookie, they're easily impressionable. They're inherently motivated, okay? They're a pretty easy audience to capture, right? Because a lot of times they want to be there, right? They want to be there. They want to learn. So we just have to mentor them, okay? Now, make sure that if you're going to take on that responsibility, that you're fully prepared to do it the right way. Then we have the senior firefighter, and this is where it gets a little difficult, right? Because they're super experienced, they're a wealth of knowledge, but they're also probably less likely to buy into change, and that's okay. That's going to be slow going, kind of like Mark mentioned earlier. That's going to be slow going getting the senior guy to buy into that change, but it's also important that we try to harness that, because once we can tap that and get them to buy in, it kind of becomes validated for everyone else in your department. You just get a handful of senior guys on board, and now they're like, oh wow, well this isn't just the 26-year-old loudmouth who's running his mouth about this stuff. The guy who's been on the job for 30 years agrees. So we've seen this before. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I think that's nonsense, right? If that horse is thirsty, it's going to drink. So we need to make people thirsty. The first thing that we have to do is we have to recognize the root of the problem, okay? Recognizing it is easy. We just look around, right? We just look around. We say, okay, this is what we see that's going on. Is this right? Is this wrong? If it's wrong, now we've recognized that it's a problem, okay? Who here has heard excuses like, it's just, they're just too energetic, right? Or he's too aggressive, or he doesn't know his place, okay? What kind of mentality, what kind of public service mentality is that? Now, we've recognized it, but we can't go exposing it just yet. So now we get their attention, okay? Kind of like Ryan did, painting things on the walls and stuff like that. We're getting their attention through, I like these little tidbits that people see, and it's really hard to just see that at work. This is Squadman Steve. He's our chalkboard, quote board at work. We try to put stuff up that inspire introspection, because people see that, they walk by and they're like, does that apply to me? It might. Maybe I'll change. And then we have to set a good example. This is leadership 101, right? We have to demonstrate what we're preaching. So we've recognized the problem, and then we've started to get their attention a little bit. We've set a good example, right? And people are going to start to talk. Good, bad, or just good, bad, or just curious. People are going to talk about what we're doing. And then this is where we can start to inundate them with motivation. Now, I got to word this correctly. I like really aggressive, abrasive talk when it comes to this. It works so well in politics for a reason, right? When people feel marginalized, they're going to adapt to the most inclusive culture. That does not mean calling people out. And hey, man, why did you do that? There's a way more appropriate forum for that, okay? But let's be honest, we're saving lives, not selling cookies. So I think it's okay to be a little abrasive with the rhetoric that we use. And it's little things like this. And now we can expose the problem, okay? We've gotten their attention. We've demonstrated the correct behavior over and over again. Now we can bring the problem to the forefront. And then we create hype. It's human nature to want to get on board with the masses, right? So we start the conversation. We've seen it at work, and it's crazy because I'm at the busiest engine in the city, and we're probably one of, if not the youngest crews in the city, and we're probably the loudest crew in the city. So whereas by the old norm, we should have been silenced and swept under the rug, instead, we've seen changes echoed throughout the training department and on other shifts, and people starting to buy into this. So you create the hype, the change is going to change from the bottom up. I like sensationalized hype. Positive reinforcement's important, but after a while, positive reinforcement, I think, is going to kind of fall into just the expectations of being really good at your job. So it's also important to condemn negative behavior, right? Because incompetence, indifference, laziness, those are all the things that are going to get us killed. So again, like I said, I'm not pointing stuff out at people and being like, why are you doing this? But I like to kind of call attention to specific behaviors. No names associated, anything like that. But so people see it and they're like, oh, hey, like I said, is that me? Am I that guy? I really don't want to be that guy because that doesn't look like the person I want to be working with. And then the very last step is to educate, right? We've kind of gone through this whole process. Now they're paying attention, we can begin the education process, and this is an ongoing thing, right? This never stops. But hopefully now, by this point, some of the naysayers are now iffy, and maybe even some of the naysayers, at least they're thirsty, right? At least now they're thirsty for that information. So this is one of my quotes here. I know my crew is the best one out on the streets is yours. Before long, you'll see these results, all right? The pride is still there. In fact, it's stronger than ever. But the mindset, the culture has changed, right? We're not keeping things nice so they look nice. We're keeping things nice so that they can operate at peak functionality. We're not excited to come to work because of the shirt we wear. We're excited to come to work because of the job that we do. Okay? If we can change that culture of personal accountability through emphasis on training, through changes in the way that we approach tactical decisions, all right? Maybe more and more new firefighters are going to be mentored into that mindset, right? You kind of create this hype, you blow it up, and then hopefully as new firefighters start to come up, firefighters like me who expected to just be led in the right direction right off the bat, hopefully now that's actually going to happen from the get-go, and before long we've kind of inspired this entire culture. So that's everything I have. I really appreciate you guys' time. I know I ran a couple minutes over. I just threw up some quick contact information. I'm the young guy at work, and I'm trying to do this with just a handful of other guys. So I know there's other young people in here. If you want to get in touch, just let me know, and maybe I can share some of the stuff that we've done that has helped see the changes that we've seen at work.
Hi, this is Will Antunes with Lion. I'm here to show you the Lion fire training system. It's called the Attack Fire Training System. At a push of a button, hit some smoke. This smoke machine is good for about 1,000 square feet, fill a room in about 1 minute of time to near blackout conditions. What this system does is allows you to use a digital nozzle to work with the system in terms of extinguishing the flames. Digital system will allow you to go through that repetition over and over and over again in a room much like this. We're in a ballroom, we're not in a fire facility. Everything we're doing here is safe. It's totally inert. Train lots of firefighters doing this in just a short order of time. For more information, visit lionprotects.com.